Hey, Brittany, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited we got to talk about this meet together because Utah is one of your favorite teams. Tell me about your fandom of Utah Utes.
Sure. Yeah. So I am wearing my Utah gymnastics shirt for the occasion. I was like the biggest Miley O'Keefe fan when she was a junior elite. And so I just followed her career to college and really fell in love with Utah during that time that she was there. I always loved Miley O'Keefe's gymnastics. And so I really found myself gravitating towards her and Utah when she started competing there and just really enjoyed the team as a whole, their gymnastics. I thought around that time their floor choreography was really improved and really liked watching it. So that's how I became a fan of Utah.
And now it's nice to see her on the side as a student
Yeah.
assistant coach. And I think they said in the broadcast that Carly Dockendorf, head coach, and Maya Hambrick collaborate on the choreography now. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's what they said. I thought the choreography in general, we can obviously get into this more in a bit, was really, really good. I maybe the last year or so kind of felt a little underwhelmed by it based on previous seasons, but I really enjoyed the choreography last night.
Yeah, I think I was so excited to see the live piano music at the Meet the Team a
Yeah.
few weeks ago, and then it was really exciting just to see, Jaylene's routine again this season is so, as it always is, but so beautiful, and that
Yeah.
beautiful cut of piano music is so nice. But like you said, we'll get into that. We met a few seasons back because we're in a New York City fantasy gymnastics group
Yes.
together, and
So fun.
it's super fun. It's not quite as cutthroat as some of them, but we get together for a brunch and to draft our teams together. Who did you end up with from Utah on your team this season?
So I ended up with three gymnasts from Utah, and I try not to do more than two from a team, but we got to the last round and I really needed a vaulter. So I ended up with Ashley Glynn in the 20th pick. Great get. And I also have Amelie Morgan and Anna Padurariu.
Fantastic. I have to be honest, when we were going through the draft, I wasn't sure if we would see Anna Padurariu
Yeah.
on too many events this season, but she looks great, and I think we're going to see her throughout the season on at least those two events.
Yeah, I really wasn't sure what to expect either, but I was really impressed with her at the Red Rocks preview. She looked really confident, really crisp, and so I felt really good about drafting her, and I'm excited to see how she progresses throughout the season.
So before we jump into the specific rotations in this meet, there were a couple of things I was really looking for coming in.
Mhm.
Utah obviously is coming off of four strong seasons where they've been in the top four, actually 5 seasons where they've been in the top four. They finished number 3 last year. And of course, with the number one recruit in the country coming in. They obviously went through some changes of their own with the coaching staff last season and a few of their athletes leaving, but it's like they haven't missed a beat. They've just reloaded and continue to put out really impressive performances.
Yeah, I was really interested in particular to see how their beam rotation would look this season. Obviously, losing Miley and Abby, two of the best beam workers in the country, is difficult to replace. And even with them in the rotation, they had a bit of inconsistency throughout the last season. And so I was really curious to see how they would respond to that. And they looked amazing last night on beam. So really excited about that progress.
Would it still be Utah Beam? The
You
answer
know,
is it's still
It's
Utah Beam.
it's still Utah Beam. Wasn't sure how that was gonna go, but I think with Avery and with Anna and Cami Winger, and we'll talk about her more later as well, but they looked so confident and looked like they slipped right into that rotation perfectly.
And then for Utah State, they lost, of course, their whole coaching staff and a
Yeah,
number of their really key players 2 seasons ago when Clemson started.
yeah,
I think this coaching staff is really, it looks, it's just the first meet of the season, but it looks like they're doing a really good job of rebuilding this team. Three super impressive freshmen who
yeah.
contributed on multiple pieces throughout the night. What were you hoping to see from Utah State?
Yeah, I really did not know what to expect from Utah State. I hadn't seen them a ton last season during that first rebuilding year. And obviously, before that, as you mentioned, the team looked so different. And so I really didn't know what to expect from them. But I was really, really impressed, particularly with the freshman performance. They had three freshmen who contributed well, and I think that given that it was their first college meet, they showed a lot of confidence. I think maybe one of them had a fall on beam, but despite that, they looked really, really great, and I think they're going to be huge impact players for this team and help them progress in the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal, and I think the commentators mentioned this too, could be very much to target one of those top 36 spots and make it to
Yeah,
the postseason. They were number 45 last season, but I think already we're seeing some really strong improvements. Like you mentioned, there were a few breaks throughout the meet. I think if they can clean those up and have clean performances coming up, I think they can absolutely keep that postseason in their sights this year.
absolutely. I think that that will be a really attainable goal for them. I think priority number one is probably going to be working on vault. I think that's probably where a lot of those lower, ranked teams struggle, and you could definitely tell the difference in the vault dynamics, amplitude, landings between a team like Utah and a team like Utah State. But if they can hone in on those vaults, I think they have a really good shot at making postseason.
So Elisa Mao was one of the commentators at this meet.
Yes,
I really enjoy her
he's so
analysis.
good.
Yeah, she's great. She points out all of the things that I'm seeing. I feel like she's very fair. And one of the, speaking of goals, she mentioned that Utah is really zeroed in on winning a national title. I thought that was a bold thing to put out on January 3rd, but that seems to really be the focus of this team.
Why not? They've finished in the top four the last few years. Honestly, going into the Final Four last season, I thought they had a great chance to win it all. Obviously, we saw what happened on vault, but they have a lot of potential to be a national champion, as do several other teams in the country. And I'm excited to see how they progress throughout the year and see if that's a goal that's attainable for them.
So let's jump in. Utah began in the Huntsman Center on the vault.
Yes.
5-10-0 start values in this lineup. Who really stood out to you on the vault?
Yeah, this was an interesting rotation. Some highlights and some lowlights, for sure. I really liked how Ella Zerbis started off the rotation. I think she's a really great leadoff option there. She got a 9.75 for her Yurchenko 1.5, and I thought that that was a little bit low, but I'm fine with that if that is the level of scoring we're going to keep consistently throughout the season based on the new scoring rules. So I was fine with that. And then we had some issues from Grace McCallum and Cami Winger, some stumbles on their landing. Grace only ended up doing a Yurchenko full, which I think may have actually been planned. That's also what she did at the preview. But even that Yurchenko full looked a little bit scary. So I hope she's okay. And it's just a matter of endurance and getting that built up throughout the season. And then, you know, leave it to Makenna Smith to pick things back up. I am like the biggest fan of hers. I think she is so underrated, such a great gymnast, really lovely human being. Had the pleasure of speaking with her for a few minutes at the national championship this year, and she's just exactly as she is in real life, as she comes across on TV, just fun and easygoing. And her vault was fantastic last night, just a step forward. She didn't quite absorb the landing enough, so caused a step, but that vault is fantastic. I will die on the hill that I think that she should have at least tied Anna Roberts for the vault title last year at NCAA's, and I'm really glad to see that she is picking right back up where she left off. And then, of course, we have Ashley Glynn, who anchored the rotation. Really excited about her vault this season. It looked amazing in preseason. So I'm glad to see that it translated to actual competition because we don't always see that. So she ended up with a 9.925 for her Yurchenko 1.5. And I thought that that was a fine score. She had some piked hips, a little bent knees, but some vaults that we saw from her in preseason were really, really clean. And so I'm sure it was just first meet, making sure it was safe. And so I think that will be a really, really great anchor vault without having Jaden Rucker in the lineup for Utah this season.
Especially with a rotation like this, where there
Yeah.
were some early rotation challenges.
Yeah.
I was really impressed that, like you said, Zerbies, Neff, and Smith
Yes, Avery Neff. Can't
all
forget
did
her.
that safe, landed a little bit forward, a little step or a little hop. I think for the first meet in January, that's exactly what you want to see. Well completed, just a little bit of extra momentum and stepping forward. I mean, I thought Neff in particular, I mean, the arms were up. It wasn't an off balance hop forward. It was just a hop forward because there was a little bit of extra momentum. She's going to be a vaulting star this season and
Yeah.
probably on a bunch of other events too.
Oh yeah. And she stuck her ball at the Red Rocks preview. I'm sure we'll be seeing that throughout the season. It was really interesting because Jim Watson on the broadcast called it a stumble out of the landing on Avery's vault. And we all know how Jim's commentary is. Sometimes it's not the most accurate or
Informed.
new informed, but I thought that was a poor choice of word for her very safe landing with a hop forward.
Completely agree. That was exactly the kind of hop forward you want to see, especially coming up after two vaults that didn't go the way that they were supposed to go. I thought that was exactly the way to come back. I'm always looking for who's that athlete that can step up and really get the team back on track, and I thought Avery Neff did a great job of that.
Absolutely.
The two exhibitions. Okay, so first of all, we
Yeah.
didn't see Zoe Johnson at all in the Red Rocks preview, and I thought, where is Zoe Johnson? Counting on her for this vault
Yeah.
and floor, right? So it was nice to see, I mean, a huge pop off on that Yurchenko full, just didn't get the rotation all the way around and was a little bit short.
Yeah. Um, I didn't know what to expect from her at all because we hadn't seen her at the Red Rocks preview. She looked great in all of the preseason videos we saw of her Yurchenko 1.5. And so that full landing was a little bit scary for me, but I'm hoping it was just a first meet fluke and we'll get to see her back out there again because if she's healthy, she can be a really big contributor for this Utah team.
Absolutely. And then Clara Raposo was
Yeah.
glad to see her do the Yurchenko full and a half, but she looked a little locked-legged on her landing too, like almost an ouchie there. But she ended up competing on bars and the exhibition as well. So I'm hopeful that that means she was feeling okay and just kind of misjudged the landing on that one.
Yeah, I wasn't totally surprised to see that type of vault from Clara. It's, I think, very similar to what she did at the Red Rocks preview. Um, so hoping that she can work on that throughout the season. I think it could be a great depth option for Utah, but right now I'm not seeing that vault cracking the lineup yet. So hopefully, with the new vault coach that they brought in, they can really refine that vault for her.
I think they said there's 11 10-0 vaults on the Utah lineup, which
Crazy.
is great. Um,
Yeah.
one thing I was wondering is when we would start seeing Grace's full and a half. So, like you said, it was just the full at this meet. So, hopefully, she's gonna get there a little bit later in the season. We can talk about Floor later. She seemed maybe winded after Floor, or maybe like she's just getting over a cold or something. She just didn't seem full strength. So, I'm hopeful that maybe in 2 weeks we'll see full strength Grace.
Yeah, she definitely looked like she was lacking a little bit of endurance with her floor routine and with the vault. Again, could be because she was sick. I know everyone's getting sick this time of year. I was just sick for 2 weeks. It was terrible. But would not be surprised at all to see that Yurchenko 1.5 in the next couple of weeks from her. And when
And
she's doing that vault, it's really great. Obviously, that's where she got injured a few years ago, so I'm sure they're just being really careful with it.
yeah, yeah. And McKenna in the post-meet interview said that she had just come off of a cold as well. So to
Yeah.
see her
Well,
have
it
such
did
a
not look like it
dominant
at all.
performance.
Just saying, it didn't look like that at all for McKenna. She looked so good last night. So maybe colds are good for her. Maybe it helps you. Sometimes when you have something else to stress about and distract you, you actually compete better. So maybe it's one of those situations.
So Utah State was on bars in the first rotation. I did not actually realize they've put together a really impressive coaching staff over there. So Robert Ladani is their bars coach, of course, formerly from Florida and then Denver, Utah, and Nebraska in between. Always been a great bars coach, and I thought there were some nice highlights here. London Vandertulen, one of the freshmen, she was one of the early highlights for me. She went in the third position with that Maloney pack, but then a Stalder to double tuck and drilled the landing. I thought that's a really impressive freshman debut for Utah State.
Yeah, London really impressed me, as did Olivia Orengo in that leadoff spot. I didn't know who she was going into this meet, to be completely frank. And she really, really blew me away with this bar routine. Just so much confidence, some slight form breaks in the routine, but really, really impressive start to get Utah State off for the season. So I think we're going to see big things from her and the rest of the freshmen, particularly in this lineup, but throughout all four of Utah State's lineups.
Absolutely. And just in terms of the rules and some of the conversation that's happening about whether single bar releases should be required, there were three of the
Yeah.
six routines had single bar releases, and I thought they looked really, really nice. Brianna Brooks in the fifth spot in particular, she does the Ray, the Towan Takachev. Her flexibility is so amazing that when they slowed down the ray in slow motion, it was like I couldn't believe the position that she had in that.
I know. I have not been paying enough attention to Brianna Brooks, and I'm so sorry about that. Her bar routine is stunning. Her form, her amplitude on her release, as you just mentioned, her dismount, flares it out, sticks it. Just a really, really beautiful bar worker overall.
Yeah, agreed. And her extension and flexibility, she shows it off so well on bars, and we saw it later on beam. It's just really impressive to watch, and I'm looking forward to, like you said, I'm glad we get a bonus season to enjoy Brianna Brooks's gymnastics. And Avery Bibby, just to mention her in the fourth spot, she did miss her Tkachev, but her double layout was so high. They had very impressive, I think, three beautiful double layouts in this rotation that, again, just big thumbs up. I think there's a few things to clean up. They were able to drop the 9-0 from Avery, and they counted only 9.75s and higher. And just to mention what you said earlier about starting the Utah vault rotation with the 9.75, I was definitely seeing the same thing too. I think the new judges evaluation system, part of the goal is to make sure that meets are judged fairly across the country, that regardless of what conference you're in, what color your leotard is, you're starting at the same level. And I thought, okay, if this means we're kind of going to start our rotations around 975, or 975 is that score that's like, okay, you did fine, that was a 9.85 or 9.8 in previous seasons. So at least we're giving the judges a little bit more space to try and separate the athletes.
Yeah, I think if it stays consistent, it could be a really good thing for the sport. We all say this all the time, but we have 10 whole points. Let's use them.
Right.
And I think we as fans as well need to embrace it and adjust our own expectations. I know a lot of us who play fantasy, um, if we see a 9-8, it's like it's no good to us. But I think we all need to kind of embrace this new change and hope it stays this way and be like, yeah, 9.75, that's a great leadoff score. Because I think we really do need to have more separation, and allow the judges to reward someone like Brianna Brooks, whose routine is just so clean, shows so much virtuosity, and allow her to have actual separation between the other routines in the rotation.
Yeah, agreed. I had the same reaction too. I thought, well, I'm counting a couple of 9.75s now, but probably everybody else is too.
Yeah.
So as long, like you said, as long as it's fair across the board and it stays that way, then I think it's good. In the second rotation, Utah State moved to vault, and another
Yes.
coaching gem in the arsenal at Utah State, Rachel Slocum, was coaching vault,
Yes.
formerly of Florida. And before then,
I think she was at EMU and then transferred to Florida.
that's what I was thinking of, is that she
Yeah, that
competed at
sounds right.
EMU before
Yes.
Florida. Yeah,
Yeah.
State, and then it was fun to see her, and I think
Yeah.
she's done a nice job. Utah State, a full lineup of Yurchenko fulls. No, that's not right. Mostly Yurchenko fulls, and then Isabella Vader in the third spot did that
Yeah.
full-on tuck off. The technique on that always looks a little bit wonky to me, and
It always does.
hers was a little whipped around, but I mean it's a solid vault. She landed it safely. But one of the Yurchenko fulls that stood out to me is freshman Kylie Madrano in the fifth spot.
Yes.
Really much straighter body, just a small hop, but really clean, good dynamics on that vault.
Yeah, you could really tell the difference between her vault and some of the previous Yurchenko foals in the rotation. It just stood out. And I think that is a great example of the types of vault that Utah State needs to be putting out there in order to be competitive for regionals. It was so much higher, so much more dynamic, beautiful flare out, really, really strong Yurchenko full. And I thought also Nyla's vault right after her was similarly really, really lovely.
Yeah, really straight, really good height. And I agree with you. If they can get the rest of those just a little bit more power and straight, a little bit straighter form, that's going to be a nice, solid rotation. Now, Utah State and Utah both finished the first rotation just under 49. So Utah State's bars was 48,875 and Utah's vault was 48,925. It was very close. After this rotation, they were separated by almost a point. So just like you said earlier, that vault is really a place where Utah State needs to hone in on picking up some points. And actually, Elisa Mao mentioned that whereas Beam used to be the event that separated teams. She thinks now it's shifted to vault. And I can
Yeah.
totally see what she's saying because the judges did a nice job, I think, of separating the vaults that had great height and dynamics and the vaults that were a little bit lower with some sketchier form. They were not afraid to throw out those, 9.6, 9.65 scores for vaults that weren't cutting it. And I think that's, kudos to the judges for really separating those vaults.
Yeah, I completely agree with Elisa. I think that is in the past few seasons, what I have noticed has been the separator. Um, a lot of even those lower ranked teams can put together a really nice, beautiful beam rotation of 9.8s, 9.85s. But if you're struggling on your Chinko fulls, they're going to score in that 9.6, 9.7 range instead of that 9.8, 9.9 range. And that is really where you start to build up that difference. I think one place in particular that maybe Utah State could automatically get that boost is from Brianna Brooks. She had a really scary vault to start the rotation, and I actually was worried because some of those Utah vaults look kind of wonky, and then she fell and slipped, and she's a really experienced competitor. So I was like, oh no, it's Sydney happening all over again.
Check the
But
vault.
I was worried, so I'm really, really relieved to see that the rest of the rotation was able to complete their vaults safely. But I think if Brianna is doing a vault like normal, I think that will be an automatic boost for Utah State's vault rotation this season.
That's a really good point because they'll also start from a much higher place and then
Yeah.
they can just continue to build on that. I was also pleased to see that they had two exhibitions go up and do solid looking
Yeah.
Yurchenko fulls. So there is some depth there and they can continue to play with that throughout the season.
I was really excited to see Mia Whitty vault. I wasn't sure what we'd see from her this season. Obviously known in the past when she was an elite gymnast as a really beautiful beam worker. So to see her vaulting as well and adding some more events is really exciting.
Absolutely. So Utah was on bars in the second rotation. I would say that your fave, Makenna Smith, was one of the huge highlights for me. Starting
Absolutely.
off that rotation, great handstands, really beautiful releases, just a small slide on the dismount, but I thought that was an amazing start to the rotation.
Yeah, her bars and her beam have really come a long way in the past few seasons. She's so clean there, and I think she is a great leadoff option, but perhaps similarly to what they've been doing with Amelie Morgan, maybe next year we'll see her move back in the lineup a little bit and get rewarded for that beautiful form.
Yeah, yeah. I would say Avery Neff was another big standout to me. I love that release sequence at the beginning of the clear hip into the ginger into the overshoot. And they pointed out her clear hip was a little arched. It didn't exactly hit the handstand. But then to just keep going, full twisting double layout, completely stick it. I was super impressed at how she was able to really fight through that routine.
Yeah, it was not perfect, and you can tell that she was fighting throughout the routine. But she did not show it at all. That dismount was fantastic. I personally am not the biggest fan of a full twisting double layout off bars. I think they never quite look right to me. But hers is really interesting looking. It almost looks like a circle, if that makes sense. And it's really different from the other ones, and her ability to stick that is great. And I hope we're able to see that consistently throughout the season. I know that dismount is sometimes a little bit harder to stick, and so that will be a focus point, I think, for me throughout the season is how is Avery Neff handling sticking that dismount. Yeah, so I think that we saw pretty typical routines from Amelie Morgan and Grace McCallum. Solid. Amelie Morgan still has a little bit of that foot separation on her hardwaj, but it always scores really well. I'd love to see that cleaned up, but it's been, I think, the same throughout her entire career. And I know once you hit a certain point, there are just some habits that are really hard to break. But really solid routines from her and Grace. Ella Zerbis is a really interesting one. She has so much potential on this event. She did last season as well. Where we saw her struggle a bit was with consistency. And similarly to last season, the Red Rocks preview, and here we saw a little bit of issues on her transition. So she learned a Jaeger in the off season and connecting that to what I think is supposed to be an overshoot, but she's almost trying to hit a handstand and go to a bail. And so if that's what they want to commit to, then they should maybe focus on committing to that. But that is going to be an area where she needs to maybe make a decision on which skill she's going for because right now it's not quite clear which one it is. Um, just a generally a nervous routine for her. I think that she has so much potential, but if we see the same consistency struggles as we did last year, we could see someone like Ashley Glynn step into that lineup. She did a really clean routine in exhibition, beautiful Stalder work. I think they said she scored a 9.9 in the exhibition, so that would be a routine that they could definitely use in the rotation. Clara Raposo also competed in exhibition. Form breaks on her Maloney and her pack, but her Van Leeuwen was beautiful. Again, a routine with a lot of potential, but some work to be done before it's lineup ready. But overall, I feel like bars is the place where we've seen Utah not look as elevated as some of the other events in the past few years. And I thought that this rotation was really promising.
Yeah, so they've been talking about the fact that Jimmy Pratt focused on both bars and vault last year. So I wonder if bringing in this new vault coach has really allowed Jimmy to put more focus on the bars. And I agree, if that's an area where they've not started as strong in the past, they knocked it out of the park with a 49.375 at this meet. Really, really strong. And like you said, to see that there's a couple even waiting in the wings who could, I mean, Ashley Glenn is ready to step into that lineup right now. Back to what you were saying about Zerbis, though. First of all, huge Jaeger. Andy reminds me of the
Yeah.
Andy Lee Jaeger that we've enjoyed for so many seasons from Cal. I mean, just huge. But yeah, she needs to figure out, is she trying to connect it to a bail? That is a really tricky connection and the kind of thing you typically don't see in NC2A because it's not going to be as consistent as, the overshoot to 45 degrees. And I was a little bit concerned because she looked nervous on a couple of events that we saw her on, and they ended up pulling her from floor. Do you think the look on her face was giving me perfectionist vibes? Like she wants to be perfect every
Yeah.
single time, and it really is devastating to her when she has a small mistake.
Yeah. I definitely got that impression. I think It might be wise to pull back her events for a few weeks, get her some confidence competing vault and maybe floor because her floor is lovely and very consistent. And so perhaps easing her back into bars, even if they want to keep her on bars, maybe skip doing the beam exhibition. I know their goal is to have her compete the all around this season, but she fell at the Red Rocks preview. She fell last night. She hasn't had consistency on that event in the past either. And so I think it might be wise to let her focus on what she's really confident in and then slowly work back in those other things. They have the depth. So thankfully, they don't need her to compete on bars right now. And it might be smart to maybe figure out what they want to do with that bar routine and wait a little bit until that is ready to go. I wonder if it makes sense for them to have her do the Jaeger, then cast back up, and then go into a bail if they want to commit to the bail, because it looks like it could be a beautiful bail. So
Absolutely.
that might be a way for them to go with that routine instead of trying to do that overshoot connection. I also want to shout out Anna Padurariu because we haven't talked about her yet on this rotation. It was her first competitive routine back in what, 2 years? And she looked really good. I think what we saw from her on her dismount is pretty similar to the issues that she's had in the past when she was competing at UCLA, just a low landing there. And I'm really curious to see if they're able to figure that out this season with her because that's always where she has struggled in the past. Her form in the routine itself is beautiful and really strong, but that dismount scares me.
Agreed. Beautiful handstands, gorgeous form throughout the routine. It's like it's a tucked fold in that's not rotating very fast. So it comes in really low. It reminds me of Alexis Jeffrey would sort of do her full in like that. And I think in one of the meets they mentioned that it was a technique to try and make sure she could stick the landing. But I agree. I think they need to rethink that just to see the comparison between Anna Padurariu's full in and Grace McCallum's that pops up in the air, rotates, and then she can open up and look for that landing. I mean, I don't know if it's the kind of thing that you can fix once you're in season. Maybe she was holding back because it was the first meet, but yeah, that worried me the slow rotation on the full end.
Yeah, I think she's someone who could really actually benefit from that oh, Stalder or full pirouette to double tuck dismount because she does have beautiful form on those skills. And I think just a clean double tuck for her would be stickable, would be consistent, would not be scary. I don't know if that's something that they've ever played with, but it might be worth exploring for her.
And also, Utah's done a great job of sort of the front half dismounts
Yeah.
that Amelie Morgan does and that Makenna Smith does. If Anna has ever trained one of those, that feels like that's another option that might at least be worth playing with.
And pay homage to her Olympic teammate Ellie Black, of course.
Yes. That's great. That's great. So, like we said, just in terms of summarizing this rotation, there were no 10-0 vaults from Utah State, but it feels like there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of the height and the form there, that they can continue to grow those. I counted two stuck landings from Utah's bars routines. Not that that's necessarily the focus, the first meet of the season, but very strong overall on bars, and they pulled into the lead by about a point on this rotation. In the routine break, they did the interview with Grace McCallum, and they were talking about it being her final season. And I had a moment because it seems like her 4 years has been so short. Have we been trained by these COVID years, and now four seems like too short
Yes.
of a time?
We have totally, our perception of how long someone's college career is totally warped um, because of all the fifth years and also because Grace was injured for half a season. It feels like her career has flown by in the blink of an eye. When they said that, I was like, wait, what? It is. I think
The other
similarly to her, like Leanne Wong, I cannot believe she's graduating this year. I'm not ready. I
I
think she's
know.
going to stay in elite though, so at least we'll get to see her compete beyond her college years. But I get the impression that Grace is probably going to be done after this season, and so we'll just enjoy her while we can.
Yeah, one of the other quotes she said in that interview was if there was a professional league, she would want to stick around and do it. And I thought,
Yeah.
isn't there one? Isn't there one that somebody's working on? I know there's just been very little information about it, but I don't know. They need to call whoever's working on the professional league, call Grace McCallum because she's interested.
Yeah, we keep hearing about this mystery professional league, but I'm not confident it exists.
They have a Twitter account. I don't know if they have an
Oh,
actual league. So moving over to Beam, here was our big question coming in. Is Utah Beam still going to be Utah Beam? And the answer was almost given with that first routine from Anna Padurariu. Beautiful presentation. Elisa Mao said it was a joyful performance, and I couldn't agree more. I thought it was so beautiful.
yeah. I was really impressed. I always felt like Anna's beam at UCLA wasn't quite living up to her potential. Obviously, she is a world silver medalist on that event. She is an absolutely beautiful worker who has been capable of so many skills. And I never quite felt like she got there. But this routine was so confident, probably the most confident I've seen her compete in college. Again, though, we still had a little bit of under rotation on her dismount. She's doing the gainer pike, as is a lot of this Utah rotation, but it was a little short, a little scary. Um, so I'm not sure what it is about dismounts for Anna, but I'm sure that they are working on fixing those. But that is probably the one area where we can see improvement from her.
Yeah, I agree. There were some other gainer pikes and gainer fulls. For instance, Makenna Smith in that third rotation go in the third spot, goes high, opens up, and
Yeah.
totally stuck it. Grace McCallum, similarly, her gainer tuck full, it goes so high she's able to really complete that and spot the landing. Same with Ella Zerbas in the exhibition as well. So I think you're right. I think it's just about like Jalen Gilstrap had that hop forward on her gainer pike, and Anna Padurariu had a step forward on her gainer pike. It's just about maybe you have to get a little bit of extra confidence if you're running off the end of the beam and flipping backwards.
And this was a spot in particular where I really appreciated Elisa's commentary. I think what she does really well is not only explain what the deduction is, but what caused the gymnast to take that step, take that hop to lead to the deduction. So she takes you through in a really digestible way. Um, this was an under rotation. She didn't generate enough power off the end of the beam, and therefore she came up short and had to take a step forward. I really appreciate that about her commentary and felt that it really was highlighted in this rotation.
Agreed. And then Cami Winger, I mean,
My gosh, yes, so good.
second spot, totally nailed this routine, including the layout, step out series, the gainer full that she stuck. I mean, everything was so solid. 995. It just showed us that when a routine deserves it, the judges will go for that nice high score. I was so happy to see her do that.
Yeah, you could tell that she was a little bit off on her series on that last layout step out, but she corrected it so well that I'm not even sure if you could see that from the judge's angle. I think we saw that a lot with Miley O'Keefe's beam routines, but she was so good about correcting and making that tiny, tiny adjustment that it wasn't even noticeable for the judges from where they're sitting on the side. Really beautiful routine. I just loved her confidence throughout it. Um, she looked like she belonged up there. And for someone who didn't compete beam all that much last year, she's in. She solidified her spot in that rotation, really seamlessly is taking over in those big shoes of Abby and Miley. And I'm really excited to see how that continues to progress
I
all
mean,
year.
The instinct would be she needs to be a little bit later in the rotation, but if she can go up
You
second
say
and get
that
a
about everyone.
995, yeah,
Honestly, this order is interesting. I like that they moved Amelie Morgan back in the lineup. Um, and we have Grace McCallum anchoring, which I think is a very natural position for Grace. She obviously anchors floor, she anchors bars, but I don't quite know if I love her in this anchor spot on beam. I think there's just something a little bit, maybe it's her form on her series. I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's something about her beam routine that doesn't scream anger to me. And I think she's going to stay there, but I wouldn't mind if they played with the order of this rotation a little bit.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. In the past, we've had kind of that magical routine would be number six, the Miley O'Keefe routine, or um, it's interesting. It would be fun to see what Cammie Winger or maybe Avery Neff could do in that sixth spot to just rack up all the tens all season long. Whereas, like you said, Grace occasionally has some um, either bent legs or some form that just looks a little bit 9-9-ish or 9-9-5-ish.
I do want to shout out her wolf turns, though. We all know no one likes wolf turns. I actually don't mind them when they're done well, and Grace's are done really well. She has beautiful, perfect form on them. She does too, which is a little bit of overkill, but in NCAA, we don't see that very often or anywhere else at all. So I don't mind it here. And so while her form elsewhere may have a little bit of bent legs, soft knees, flex feet, her wolf turns are really stunning.
Agreed. They were so smooth, so beautiful. So Makenna Smith in the third spot, I
Yes.
couldn't agree with you more. She's one of those athletes that when she started at college, you could see her being a vault and floor person totally, but she's continued to improve and work on bars and beam. I mean, her form was so nice. Her legs were always straight. Her series was great. Um, and like I mentioned, she gets a lot of pop off the end of the beam on that gainer pike and really opened it up and stuck it. She's got a little bit of sassy dancing in her routine. I mean, she's got it all.
Yeah, I was so impressed. I think she is one of those gymnasts who, starting her career, I thought she'd be a great leadoff person on every event, first or second spot, solid routine, getting a 985, setting the tone, but she has really blossomed and is undeniable for those 9-9s now, where she almost has to be moved back into the lineup. She's so consistent though, so you want her in that leadoff first, second, beginning of the rotation, but um, her scores will just continue to improve if she's moved back.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is a tough rotation. Every spot's a good spot at the Utah beam
We
rotation.
we haven't even talked about Avery Neff yet, who gave I, that routine last night. I didn't So I saw a lot of people afterwards saying that her full turn was wonky. Honestly, I didn't even notice anything in the moment. But she landed that routine. I was like, these Utah judges are gonna go 10 for that, because they often do. So her 9.875 came as a surprise to me. I really like this routine. It's so unique. She does a side aerial to 2 feet, which is so interesting and different. I love her like straddle split to the U in her beam routine. Just really overall interesting composition, exciting routine, something different. I think we see a lot of repetitive skills on beam, and so her routine is like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, sometimes the cartwheel gainer full can be a little bit maybe it doesn't rise or doesn't show a lot of pop off the beam. I thought hers was really dynamic. Like it was a
Yeah.
cartwheel to exploding into a gainer full, which was very impressive. You don't think of that so much as a explosive looking skill. It's more of a let's see if I can finesse this kind of skill. But it was fun for her to show that power and finesse. Her full turn is that like reverse turn which looks really hard for me to control. And it was one of those kind of micro adjustments, just like you were mentioning with like, um, was it Cammie's tumble series where like you could tell one arm was a little funny, but she fixed it. That's kind of how I felt about Avery Neff's full turn. I wonder if she just doesn't like the regular forward turn and that's why she does the reverse turn. But yeah, that was the only area that I saw.
Yeah. But I think that she's going to be huge for them on beam. Her confidence already in the first meet. I can't say I'm surprised. I think we all expected this from Avery Neff going into season. Similarly to Kaylin Chio, we just knew that they would come out swinging, but particularly on this event, she looked like has been competing in the Huntsman for years. So she's going to be great for them. I expect that she'll also move back in this lineup. Um, and I think overall, just a super impressive rotation from Utah and Beam.
And the fact that Avery Neff has been put in a couple of challenging positions already and has come through just
Yeah,
very level, didn't get wigged out about it, just did her job.
exactly.
Um, and just a note, Ella Zerbis did do an exhibition, as you mentioned, on the beam, and she fell in her series by handspring step out, layout, step out. And again, it just looked like maybe she was just putting so much pressure on herself. She looked really disappointed or upset to have missed that. And my reaction's kind of like, girl, just take a deep breath. It's okay. It's an exhibition in week one. You have beautiful gymnastics. I think there's all the potential in the world for Ella Zerbis, and I
Yeah.
hope she can maybe just put a little bit less pressure on herself and put out there the gorgeous gymnastics that we know she's got.
Yeah, because if she can get this routine consistent, it is stunning. Her form is beautiful. She actually reminds me quite a bit of Maya Lazan from Cal, largely due to her beautiful flexibility skill that she does, where she kicks her legs over and then walks them back. It was gorgeous, but the consistency is obviously not there yet. And so I agree with you. Take a deep breath. Obviously, easier said than done, but she could be huge for this lineup if she's able to hone in on that consistency. And then we also saw Jaylene Gilstrap in exhibition. And as a fifth year, she completely reworked her beam routine, which I'm so happy about. Last year and all 3 years prior to that, she had been doing a back handspring hike layout situation to 2 feet. Not quite sure which one she was going for most of the time, but she has totally revamped that. She's now doing back handspring layout step out. So clean, so confident. Uh, Overall, a much more confident routine from her than I think we've seen in the past on beam. Still some things to be cleaned up. Her gainer pike, she had a hop forward. That can use some working on, but a great depth option for Utah here.
And of course, another event where we can see her beautiful extension and her lines and her dance is always appreciated because one is not enough.
Exactly.
So in this third rotation, Utah State was over on floor. I thought we saw a really good mix here of some double backs, double pikes, a full in from Nyla
Yeah.
Morabito in the fifth position, a few two pass routines, but I think about half also had three pass routines. I was very impressed. They mentioned that a few of the athletes had to rework some of their tumbling with the new rules. The front through to double tuck, Angel Stewart added that to her routine. It looked a little bit not quite there. And hang on to that because that's what Grace McCallum's looked like also. But overall, I was very impressed. I think Nyla Morabito was perhaps the person who stood out to me the most. A huge full in. She had great dynamic music. She had pretty toe point. Um, she did the front layout, front full to front tuck, final tumbling pass, which she showed a nice pop on that third salto. I was really impressed with her. She ended, what did she get on floor? She got a 9.85, which was Utah State's highest score on floor. Who are the other standouts for you in the floor?
Yeah, well, I'll completely agree with you. Nyla's routine was the standout for me from this rotation. I was so impressed with her musicality, her full in. I loved that pop she got on that combo pass at the end there. I think there's just so much potential with this rotation. It looked a little rough around the edges, steps out of bounds, some short landings. But I really like the variety in the tumbling overall. Isabella Vaughter was an interesting one. So she does a front double full, and it was a little wonky, but she is someone who has beautiful lines, and I think that that pass could be so big for her and for Utah State. I can see why they put her in the sixth spot in this rotation. Um, kind of maybe testing out that skill to see how it goes in this first week. But she landed it. She landed it safely. And so I'm really excited to see how she progresses on this event throughout the season. I think she is someone who has a lot of potential, beautiful split positions. So really someone who could bring in a big score for Utah State once she figures out those tumbling pass landings.
I'm glad you mentioned her because she had the best 1.5 to front layout of the whole team as well. There were a few
Yeah.
different 1.5 to front layouts that look like either they missed the punch or it's not quite there yet. They really need to find the rhythm on that pass. But hers, it didn't rise a lot, but it looked really safe and pretty form. And like you said, throughout, she showed really nice presentation. So I very much enjoyed her routine.
Also really enjoyed Jenna Eagles. Her choreography I thought was really fun. And overall, I thought that Utah State did a really nice job with the choreography. Every routine felt really different and a little bit more intricate than I think we see from some of the other teams.
Yeah, if I had to describe her music, I would say it's concept album guitar rock. I wrote that down and I
I
thought,
know
is that even a category? But that's kind of what it
it is
sounded
now.
like. So then, moving to the fourth rotation, Utah State was on beam. Always a tough place to end the meet, but I thought there were a few really nice highlights. First of all, shout out to Olivia Orengo, who went up 3 events as a freshman, did really consistent, solid performances. She did that hitch kick to kick over back handspring for her series, a round off 1.5 dismount that she stuck. There are some places there where she can clean up her execution and show a little bit more amplitude, but I thought that was a really, really solid performance in the third spot.
She completely impressed me yesterday. Um, she's going to be huge for Utah State throughout her career. She's already making such a big impact as a freshman. And Kylie Madrano, she had a fall there in the fourth spot, but she also had a really strong day overall. On the broadcast, they kept describing her as someone who was really surprising the coaching staff about how undeniable she was for these lineup positions. She competed all around. It didn't sound like that was an expectation for her going into season as a freshman, but she's going to be a star for them.
I
And even with
agree.
a fall is so normal, especially in your first routine as a freshman, not worried about it at all. She has a lot of potential on this event. And then I love Mia Whitty and Brianna Brooks in the five and six spots. I feel like the first season we saw Mia Whitty, every time I would watch her beam, it maybe lacked a little confidence, especially considering I think expectations for her on beam in college were pretty high given her elite career. I thought yesterday's routine was great. It was really confident. She does a triple series, maybe backhand spring, layout, step
Yeah.
out. But she looked great. She looked so confident, and her being at her full potential is going to be another thing that gets Utah State over that hump and into the regionals conversation.
Agreed. I thought her rhythm was so good. Like you
Yeah,
mentioned on that acro series, just solid rhythm, not a wobble. She knew she had that. She also does a front aerial. She stuck her dismount. Super impressed with that routine. And then Brianna Brooks, again, just a chance to see that incredible extension and flexibility that she has. Like split half to Corbett was a cool connection. She did the
I
back
love
handspring.
that.
Yeah,
And
so
it's
interesting.
interesting to see how she does it compared to how Reagan Smith's looked because they're obviously such different gymnasts, but both of them pull off that particular combination so well.
Yeah. And Brianna Brooks was up on her toes throughout the routine. If Kathy Johnson Clark had been commenting, I'm sure she would have mentioned
Uh,
that.
of course.
So then in this rotation, Utah was over on the floor. Makenna Smith is such a fun way to start this rotation. And that front double twist to front tuck completely
So
stone
good.
cold stuck it.
So good. She's so good.
And I would describe her music as like 50s beach rock. You could picture people with their surfboards like running out on the sand while she was doing her cool like classic throwback rock dancing. Um, in real time, I thought the Rudy to layout step out had some leg form, but they showed it in replay and it was like those legs were straight during that. I mean, she has obviously put a lot of focus on the details and it's really showing off. I think she's gave such a strong all-around performance.
Yeah. I mean, I can't rave about her enough. She, her routine is so fun. I think it's interesting. Last year she had her 70s routine. She's just going backwards in the decades. I think what we saw from that last pass, that Rudy layout step out, is a little under rotated, but I was so impressed with how she was able to maintain her leg form despite all of that. I know often a gymnast might bend their leg to try to make sure it gets around, but she completely maintained her straight legs. It looks safe. She's going to be huge for them. I do think the leadoff spot is great for her here. Really sets the tone for the rotation. It's such a fun, engaging routine. She's such a good performer, and it seems like it's just so natural for her. And I can't say enough good things about Makenna Smith.
Sometimes gymnasts are described as having cat-like reflexes, like they can always manage to land on their feet. And I might describe McKenna that way, because
Yeah.
like you said, maybe it was a little low or maybe it was a little bit under-rotated, but she just made it work. And it was, I kind of think of Simone Biles that way. You see Simone Biles sometimes not get the right punch or height on something, and she can always make it around to her feet. And I think McKenna got that gene as well.
Yeah, and not to jinx it, so I'm going to knock on my table right here, but I think they said that she's 111 for 111 hit routines, which is fantastic. No surprise. She just looks so confident, so at ease when she's competing. I think she mentioned in her post-competition interview that she loves competing. She loves showing off what they've been working on so hard in the gym. And so, no surprise to see her just feeling relaxed and confident out there.
And then in the third spot, apparently Zerbis was scheduled for the third spot, and they subbed in Sarah Crump, which, given the way that
Yes.
Zerbis's day went, feels like a good decision. And Sarah Crump did a fantastic job. She
So
only mounts,
impressed.
so impressed. She only mounts with a Rudy, and so I thought, what are the other passes going to be? But with her dancing and the other combinations that she did, front layout, front full, front pike, which was a terrific middle pass, and then that whip half to front full in the final pass, and really nice. I think Lisa commented on how she really finished all of her positions. Like her dance was very on the music, beautiful, expression that she was able to bring to it. I thought it was a big highlight for me.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see Sarah Crump in this lineup competing and how well she did. I think we've seen her in the past primarily doing some beam exhibitions, maybe once has been in the competitive lineup. And it seemed like she has had issues under the pressure of competition, but this time it looked like she was fully living in the moment. You can tell as the routine was going that she was just fully enjoying it, knowing that, she may not be in this lineup again. But after last night, maybe she will be. I thought it was a really strong routine. As you mentioned, not the most difficult, but she does three passes, all twisting passes, and her form is really nice. Her dance was well done. This could be a great depth option for Utah here. Um, Especially with the loss of Jaden Rucker and seeing perhaps as if athletes like Zerbis may not be able to go in or Poppy Grace Stickler, Clara Raposo may not be ready. Zoe Johnson, who we would have expected to see in this lineup, prior to season starting, doesn't seem like she's ready to compete yet. So Sarah Crum can be a really great option for them here in the interim and, can go in a pinch.
It also gave us one of those nice moments that it really felt like the whole team was pulling for her and
Yeah.
so like willing her through the routine and so embracing and supportive of her afterward. I thought that was a really great moment, especially since the back half of the lineup ran out of steam just a little bit.
Yeah, which is totally expected. It's the first meet of the year. Surprising fall from Avery Neff in that first spot. She looked surprised by it too, but she got right back up and did the most gorgeous 2.5 twists. So she fully corrected her being short on her front double full, went sky high on that 2.5 twist. It was absolutely stunning. Again, she's performing like a veteran as well. I thought overall this Utah rotation really shined in the performance quality. This is again another area where I find it really interesting where we have Grace McCallum. Fantastic athlete, great on floor. She obviously has the difficulty with her full in, but once you see Makenna Smith and Jaylene Gilstrap and even Avery Neff with her first routine and Ella Zerbis when she's in this lineup, going from that to Grace, who I think has improved in her artistry, but you can tell on her face the entire routine that she's thinking. Um, it lacks a little something. And so, again, I don't see them moving her out of this anchor spot. This is where she's been, but it's really an interesting dichotomy when you watch this rotation and then you finish it with Grace's routine.
Right. And you can understand the appeal, right? The
Oh
Olympic
yeah,
medalist, she's the one with the name recognition. It sort of makes sense to put her at the back end of three lineups, but yeah, so and like we mentioned before, the front through to double tuck wasn't quite there yet. She was low and had to take a stumble forward. It just looks like maybe she's getting into full routine shape, and I think in 2 weeks that'll look great. Um, but yeah, Avery Neff had that issue on her mount. She also ends with that Rudy to layout step out, which hers just floated up into the
floaty.
air.
Yep.
So powerful. And I thought, I don't think she needs to do as difficult of a mount as she does. She does front full to punch front double full.
Yeah.
That's so much difficulty. And with the other two passes that she has, I mean, it feels like that could change to front full punch Rudy or front layout front double full. She'll probably stick with it just like it is because this was probably a fluke. But
Yeah, I don't think that pass is going anywhere. I'm sure for her it's also a point of pride. Um, she, I think, is known for her, difficult, unique skills. I don't think it's going anywhere. It looked really good at the Red Rocks preview, so I'm sure it was just a weird fluke, and it'll be totally fine next week.
yeah, you're probably right. And then Jalen Gilstrap, again, another beautiful front layout to Rudy. That was her mount, also very floaty. Just the gorgeous extension and presentation that we're used to. She had an interesting save at the end. Front layout to front full was the planned dismount, and she got a little caught up in the air, so she changed it to just a Branny, but landed it and presented it like that was exactly what she was supposed to do. She scored a 9.7, and they had mentioned that she lost, by my calculations, I think she lost a tenth of bonus, so she probably started from a 9.9. Um, but I thought that was a really smart way to save a fall in a routine that had already in a rotation that had already had some challenges, so that they didn't quite get the 197, but they didn't have to count another low score.
It looked intentional in the moment. Obviously, for the fans who know what her planned routine is, we could spot that it was an error, but it really, the way she finished the skill and presented, it looked intentional. It was also interesting that at the Red Rocks preview, and we had been hearing a lot about her floor upgrades this year, knowing that she has lacked a little bit in the difficulty area, and with all of the depth and talent coming into this team, Jaylene has been working on upgrades, we've heard, and she showed a front double full at the Red Rocks preview. Didn't do it here, just stuck with the Rudy. Probably smart given that Neff fell right in front of her. I don't know if that was pre-planned or planned and decided in the moment once Neff fell, but um, a lovely routine nonetheless. To be completely honest, was a little bit underwhelmed with the routine as a whole at the Red Rocks preview with the live piano. I think it was just so hyped up.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it thinking this kind of just looks like every other routine she's done. I think what tends to happen is when gymnasts have a signature style, the choreography every year looks exactly the same. And so I was really pleasantly surprised last night. I felt like the routine stuck out a lot more. I felt like I could really see the nuances and the differences in the choreography last night, um, having had the opportunities to see the routine once prior. So I think she'll continue to improve in that area, flesh out those little details in the routine, and hopefully we see that upgrade because it looked good.
Yeah, that's a good point. If they made that decision in the moment to pull back on the difficulty because of the fall, she did an excellent job of obviously adapting to the moment, and then of course of adapting when the front full went awry. It showed a really smart, head for competition. So that really foretells good things for her this season.
Absolutely.
So they ended Utah just shy of that 197, 196.775, and then Utah State 194.45, which I think we see a lot of areas where that can really continue to grow this season. I'm pulling for Utah State to make the top
Yeah.
36 this year. I think they have put together a really strong coaching staff and a really great new class of athletes that are really filling out these lineups. So I'm very hopeful that they can do it. I'm looking for good things from Utah State this year.
Yeah, I overall too just really enjoyed their routines. Um, I think particularly on floor, on bars, they really stood out and you could just see the potential there. And they'll only continue to get better throughout the season.
Agreed, agreed. Who would you give your MVP for Utah in this meet?
Well, this will be absolutely no surprise based on the rest of this conversation, but of course, Makenna Smith, um, absolutely nailing all four of her routines. Um, just confident, beautiful, clean gymnastics, great performance quality throughout. She just really, to me, is the glue for this team, and I think she's going to be so much more valuable than most people realize at this point.
Yeah, she was fantastic. And I'll also give a shout out to Avery Neff that it was great to see that the potential and the promise and everything that everyone had hoped for really came through, and she was able to deliver in the meet and really step up in some crucial moments. Not that she didn't have some errors too, but you know, all that potential is translating into great performances on the competition floor. So that's going to be exciting to watch. And just a shout out to Ella Zerbis. I hope that she can continue to gain that confidence. She's got beautiful gymnastics. I think we love seeing everything that she does. And I think, I hope she can find her way to really delivering more confident performances by the end of the season.
Absolutely.
From Utah State, who do you want to give a little shout out to?
So I have two. So Olivia Orengo for me was a huge standout for Utah State. Just right off the bat from that very first routine of the competition, I was so impressed with her as a freshman. And then Brianna Brooks, you have to shout out that gorgeous bar routine, her beautiful form, her extension. She really goes above and beyond in those areas, and it really stands out.
Agree. Those two were amazing. I'm also going to give a shout out to Kaylee Madrano, the freshman who went all around and had the mistake on beam. But overall, I think another thing that they mentioned in the commentary was that she changed a lot of her technique once she got to Utah State. And to see a freshman who had to relearn technique deliver such solid performances, as you mentioned, she considered herself undeniable for some of these lineup spots. I just thought the future is very bright for Kyla Medrano and for Utah State. So cheers to you
Absolutely.
guys.
Yeah, she was fantastic. This team has big things ahead for them.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me to talk through this meet. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Do you think you would want to be a guest again in the future?
Anytime.
Awesome. Um, how can people reach out to you if they want to reach out and co-fangirl over Makenna Smith?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, or I guess X if we're calling it that. I'm not. But I'm at Brittany, Brittany, Alsfan, ALZ as in zebra, F as in Frank, AN as in Nancy. So I'm over there, and then I'm on Instagram at Brittany Faith with two H's.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see you again soon. Let's get together and watch a meet this season.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kent.